So now that you have an understanding about how sodium and potassium moving across the membrane produce the action potential, which is the way that neurons output information, for your discussion, I want you to think about 3 toxins that I'm going to describe and their effect, and what effect you think they will have on the action potential. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is palytoxin. Palytoxin is produced by a coral reef. Sometimes occurs when people grow it at home. They'll disturb it and suddenly it'll be released into the vents and they'll come out with difficulty breathing, lack of consciousness, and it can be quite deadly. Palytoxin enters the body through absorption or the respiratory system, and it does something very simple. Palytoxin blocks the sodium-potassium pump. It prevents the sodium-potassium pump from working. So my question for you is, what effect does the palytoxin have on the action potential graph? Take a look at the graph here and tell me what you think would happen to this action potential graph if somebody has been exposed to palytoxin. The next toxin I want to bring up is tetrodotoxin. Tetrodotoxin is most famously found in the pufferfish. The pufferfish has a gland that is full of tetrodotoxin, but people will actually eat the pufferfish as a form of sushi. Now, if you cut around the gland, there is supposedly delicious tissue, but if you pierce that gland even a tiny bit, the tetrodotoxin gets absorbed into the flesh, and when you consume it, it will eventually cause numbness, paralysis, loss of consciousness, and death. In fact, being able to serve tetrodotoxin is a long and complicated procedure in which the final test is to cut and consume your own pufferfish. About 30% of chefs that try this fail. Okay. They don't die. There's somebody watching them that say, no, you pierced the gland, don't eat it. But it can be a very dangerous delicacy to eat. So what tetrodotoxin does is it jams up the sodium-gated channel. That's what it prevents from opening. The sodium-gated channel is unable to open. So, same question before. Looking at the action potential graph, what happens? How is the action potential affected? What would the graph look like in the presence of tetrodotoxin? The last one is actually a medicine that is sometimes prescribed. It's a potassium channel blocker. Just like the sodium channel blocker that we saw with tetrodotoxin, the potassium channel blocker blocks the voltage-gated potassium channels. What effect would blocking the potassium channels have on the action potential? What would the action potential graph look like? And a bonus question, why might this be prescribed for heart arrhythmias? See if you can figure that one out. Go ahead and post your answer to the discussion board, and I'll be posting a video early next week with the answers.